a topic that came up this morning because I was looking at something and I recognized that this area of advertising is still covered in mystique. And it's B2B advertising or B2B SaaS advertising. Now, the reason why it's covered in mystique is because so many people fail at it. So many businesses that run advertising around their B2B products or their SaaS products fail. It requires a high level of advertising spend and a high level of like clear, strategic, disciplined thinking that most people don't stick to. So I was like to Cory this morning, mate, let's just talk about like our best practices around that, because whilst there's no, oh, here's the roadmap for guaranteed success, these recommendations increase your probability of success by 5% here, 10% here. So then when you do layer and stack them on each other, you have significant increase in probability of success. And this could be in, and this moves just beyond B2B. It could be like financing, SaaS, other areas that are very traditionally either very competitive, very expensive, and or that the probability of getting a client's quite hard because the nature of the business, that it could be a long lead cycle or even sales cycle as well. Right. So, Cory, do you reckon that was a pretty good intro, mate?
That was one of the best ones I think I've ever heard in my entire 35 years on this planet.
Beautiful. Well, mate, let's wipe away those tears and we can start helping out the peoples. We're here for the people. So, Cory, mate, let's put it out there. So, advertising for B2B or B2B SaaS, and why I'm saying B2B SaaS and B2Bs, they are merged because traditionally, and what typically happens is there's a high cost per click here. So the nature of a high cost per click runs to the risk of high spend or high budget required and a lot of opportunity of irrelevant or poor traffic being triggered and executed that starts feeding into the landing page and the algorithms as well. So if you were to, let's just say, and I'll give my take is after you, is someone comes to you, Cory, I've got this SaaS thing. We've got a budget of 10, 20, 50, $100,000. Give me the fundamentals of what we need to do just to get to know that we're doing it properly, at least from the start, without any data.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I usually illuminate right away is the challenges, but also the biggest opportunity, which is going to be measurement. So when you have low amounts of data flowing through the account, all the things you see promoted for Google Ads are going to be around smart bidding and AI-based targeting, all these things. Problem is that needs, and this is per Google's own documentation, needs a lot of data to do decent. I know that they start saying, we could get away with even less, but when we're talking about one unique challenge in the B2B SaaS space being longer sales cycles in a complex buyer journey, this becomes even more challenging for smart bidding. And more often than not, you're not going to have a lot of macro level conversions, demo requests, webinar signups, etc. You're going to have to lean, if you want to move to smart bidding, on those more micro conversion signals. So measurement's going to be really important. What I see more often than not is these businesses they haven't gotten to offline conversion imports. Now in 2025, I'm starting to see that more. And I'm like, thank goodness, but let's QA what's going on there. And we're talking about when you take something from your CRM, let's say Salesforce, and you are giving that and feeding that into Google Ads on a regular basis, maybe through a Google Sheet or something like that. But more often than not, I don't see a lot of micro conversions. I'm not seeing the scroll depths. I'm not seeing the newsletter signups. I'm not seeing those micro conversions tracked, which means we have less data to work with, and you might end up struggling to get the campaign to a certain level of scale you're going to be happy with. So I'm going to say, just to start, that's a big part of the conversation when someone comes to me wants to go through the best practices of B2B SaaS. Make sure we are tracking everything. We've got eyeballs on every data point because the data points are so sparse. Thoughts?
Nice, man. No, I couldn't agree more. Measurement is the most important part. You can't manage what you don't measure. It's a traditional saying. And the unfortunate reality here is the volume of traffic available for these B2B or B2B SaaS is less than normal markets. So with that, you've got to be more vigilant and just want to capture everything. The risk is you capture everything and then you start measuring against everything, and then you've just got too much data to work with. So I agree. Step one is definitely measurement. Now, in terms of what you measure, because this can move back to the strategy, is a lot of times companies go, yeah, we want to get clients. So then they just go from A to Z, or as you'd say in America, Z, and they just want to get the client. It's like we all do. We all do. So it requires that discipline of consulting and educating and guiding the business to go, someone who needs this is not just going to click on an ad and buy. And even if they click and they're researching, the biggest risk you can face is that you go, yeah, they're in research mode. So like that, like you got the top of funnel or whatever it is, middle of funnel. And then you've got them just going to the website, seeing stuff, and there's still just like a sign up button, whatever it is. That's relying on that this person's going to remember your brand in like 2, 6, 12 months time, and they've been researching and they're like this dedicated fan of you. They're watching all your videos, reading all your documentation, be like, I'm so hot and heavy for this. That's the risk here, is that people are like, oh yeah, like, well, these people are researching now, so when they're ready, they'll sign up. It's like, no. And then people go, well, why don't we retarget them? Cool, whatever. The goal is at different stages of the funnel, being at the top of funnel when people are in like problem aware but not solutions aware, where they're looking, or like middle of funnel where they're problem aware and solutions aware, and then bottom is like when they know your brand, they want to purchase. For those top two stages, you really need to make sure that the traffic, and this comes back to measurement, goes to a dedicated page with a clear and concise message to where that person is on their user journey, and the call to action is aligned to where they are. Now, the reason why I say the call to action needs to be where they like aligned to where they are is because you need to capture them. You cannot just do the whole we'll retarget them or like they'll come back when they're ready. They won't. So what you've got to do is you've got to ensure that if they're at the top of the funnel, give them a white paper. Give them something that is such a low commitment offer that the main thing is that you've got their information, so that you can proactively follow up with them, call them, email them, put them in your email marketing chain. But you need to make sure with that measurement, as you're saying, you said measure everything at the different stages as well, knowing that you don't want to be downloading a white paper for someone who's in buying intent mode, or someone who's in research mode. You don't want them to be seeing a sign up now, or, you know, speak to our sales team when they're like not even ready. So that's a bit of a blend of more the strategy with the measurement, because you've got to match where people are at on their journey as well.
Yes, and I think step number 2 gets into mining your data, right? So because that is going to trickle down into everything you're going to do strategically later. What's funny is I find a lot of agencies and marketers skip this step because they're not super confident in their analytics abilities. So when I have a client, and assuming they have existing data sets, now it might be messy, right? So we might go into that often as you go into a CRM that's been around for more than a few years, and with a lot of different sales teams and salespeople in there, it's going to be a mess more than likely. So working with the client, if you're a marketer, on what are these custom fields? What does this thing mean? What are things that are completely sunset? You shouldn't be spending 10 hours going field by field to figure out what are the definitions yourself and trying to guess. Just get the client involved in that process. What is this field? Is this something you actually track? Is this relevant anymore? Yes, you could create scripts to kind of automate this stuff, but you're still going to find a lot of custom fields that you can't. So number 2, after you've gone through the measuring and making sure all the tracking is correct, accurate, and you are measuring as much as possible, really step 2 is inherently going to be what's available, what data is already in there. And usually it's going to be the CRM first we're going to look, because that is the closest to the actions that we want to optimize the account for, right? So that's going to be, again, not just the demo requests, because those are great, but that's not the end goal. The end goal is like an SQL if it's a marketing team, or it's going to be an SAO, or it's going to be an actual closed won deal if there's enough data. That's where I'm going to be looking, is what are the segments? What are the slices of demographic information? We're talking geographic information, age if we have it, industry. What's the stuff that is leading to the thing we want the most, right? And then you can take that strategically to go, okay, now I want to go into step 3. And Michael, I'll let you jump in here with this one. So this is going to be where you start narrowing the targeting based on your findings. So now you figured
Mm,
out what the gold mines are. Like maybe it's these types of industries are most likely to actually convert. But Google Ads has been seeing historically, let's just drive a bunch of demo requests for this other industry that your
yeah.
CRM doesn't support, because the CRM says, no, 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 that industry, it gets a lot of volume. People are interested, but they don't close, right? So you can start looking
Mm.
into that stuff. And that's why step three, I think, is really going to be narrowing the targeting, narrowing the focus of your ad instead of going after everyone.
Man, awesome. Awesome. We do that with clients, although we mostly leverage that data over to Meta or Facebook ads, Facebook/Instagram ads. So yeah, it's interesting when you do dive deeper into the client's data to see what cohorts or segments actually turn into outcomes and results
Yep.
versus just like all the leads that they got. Because the data, like the algorithms in the advertising channels are biased towards what hits the conversion goals, which could
Right.
just be a page view if done poorly, which a lot of people
Right.
do. So if you've got 10, 5 different conversion points, it's going to be optimizing towards all of them, which may not be the ultimate outcome. So exactly what you've said. What we've done is the challenge is with this is also presupposing that they have a CRM and they've got
Right.
that data available. And most of the times they either don't or the data is not readily available there. So for most people, this may also flip to the other stages, like trying to get the most highly qualified traffic in and qualified leads, so then you can build off that. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just like knowing the cohorts of data, users, geographic, age, demographic, like all those things
Yeah.
towards what actually drives outcomes of the actual sale and sign up. Because once again, these B2B or SaaS have a longer time span for people to sign up because it is a considered purchase, usually has a higher ticket value to it. And a lot of times businesses do need to request funding internally or need to make sure that it's within their budget. So it's not a
Right.
2 minute thing. And usually the person making the decision is not the person who's looking as well. So there's a lot of elements to it. But that's kind of taking away from what you were just saying then about looking into that. But yeah, I agree. Know your data.
So go ahead.
No, no, that's it, man.
I was just going to say, so let's dive into that, right? So that is going to be some businesses, right? They don't have any historical data. They're just getting started. They're really excited about this idea. They have plans to maybe grow and sell the business eventually, but it's their baby. Every little click matters. They're super granular with what are the search terms coming through, and still kind of like unclear about their goals. Like we know we want to get this many SQLs or something, but we don't really know how many, right? They just haven't really figured that out. Well, I think one thing is if you don't have that historical data, I think if you're being really serious and you have the resources for it, I think the most obvious thing is to pay a market research firm to figure out some of this stuff for you. They can either take from similar clients to you and that they've worked with in the past, or public databases, things like that that are similar to your industry or vertical, and they can give you a rough idea. This isn't going to be perfect, not 100% or maybe even 90% confident, but we feel like your starting demographics are likely to be X. It's going to be this
Yeah.
age range, it's going to be these maybe genders if that's relevant, these locations, the whatever. That's usually where you would go if you have the resources. I know a lot of businesses kind of go, market research firm. Maybe they've heard bad things in the past, but just honestly, guys, that is usually going to be a good resource for that. That
Yeah.
is kind of, they're going to hate me to say this if you're in that industry, but that's kind of part of what they're for, is to provide the gaps in knowledge about the marketplace that you're in. So that it's you're paying for something very valuable. It might be incorrect. It might be, maybe 50% true, but that's better than zero. Now, if you
Mm.
don't have the resources for that, well, then your appetite for risk has to be a lot higher, because now all of a sudden, you are going into this rather blind, and you're going to have to do a lot more broad targeting with your advertisements, right? You're going to have to try a lot of different channels. You have to try a lot of different messaging, a lot of
Yeah.
different keyword and intent targeting. But usually, again, this is still going to eventually go to what I said step three is going to be, which is narrowing the targeting, not having these super loose targets like broad match. There's an argument that could be made for broad match depending on your level of risk aversion. But overall, you're going to want to start narrowing the targeting, even if you have very limited amounts of data or no data in the past. You don't usually want to start very, very broad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. It's interesting because around the market research companies, I've never actually done that or recommend that to a client, because this is just my experiences
Mm.
with the right type of keywords, understanding the keyword intent. Obviously been doing this for 10 years. So hopefully after a certain while, you know how to do this. But using two things, either benchmarks around cost per click benchmarks, CTR benchmarks, conversion rate benchmarks, and then also potentially asking them like their uh, sales qualified lead benchmarks around, or like the lead to sale rate or the lead to quote rate, blah, blah, blah. But getting some loose benchmarks within a day, a week, a month, there should be at least some guiding light towards what that could look like.
Yeah.
You can't predict the future, but with a bit of data, with a decent budget, within like a few days, you could actually have you'd take it from like a 0% knowledge to probably about an 80% based on experience, but also based on benchmarks as well. And with the advertising side, it really does come down to selecting the right type of keywords. But more importantly, when you're doing the advertising, is using advertising to disqualify people rather than to qualify them. Because the reality is, with a high cost per click and the data coming in, you want to make sure that the people clicking are the ones you actually want. So you want to be doing more to disqualify people than to qualify them. And by doing that, you'd be spending less on irrelevant clicks. And then number two is that the messaging is very clear to what you do or what you don't do. So then when someone comes through, their expectations are at a different level. And then when they come to landing page, they're more likely to convert as well. But that really always will start off with keywords, the right type of keywords with the right type of intent with it. But I'll always say this, it comes like you need to make sure that you've got an aggressive negative keyword list. Yep. And really good settings on your account.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's why you don't want to do this in-house usually yourself. You want to
no
pay an
way.
expert that has, they have benchmarks in mind. They're not going to be perfect, but they can roughly tell you, now this will probably be $30 a click for relevant keywords, not $5. So they'll come in it with some perspective there that you might not have because you don't do this. That's why you want to pay for that. Now, I know a lot of these teams want to move things internally at some point. When I hear that, I usually say, that's good if you've got someone that has done this professionally, like they have done online marketing, and then they've done the sort of T model where they've really gone deep into pay-per-click, and maybe they know a little bit of all these other things, email, SEO, whatever. But if you don't have someone like that internally, I think that is bringing it in-house assumes that Google Ads or whatever channel we're talking works in a vacuum, and that it's you just need to set it up properly once, and then everything will be fine. But that doesn't account for market conditions that are going to change. You're going to have to change your pricing, which might affect the customers that you're seeing. You might find that what you assume to be the right initial structure over time doesn't scale, and then you have to have somebody come in that knows what they're doing really, and again, that has experiences with similar clients. So, Michael, any thoughts on that when you start hearing like, eventually we'll move things in-house?
Mate, it's always the ones that are run in-house for this type of industry that are the worst. And it doesn't matter if someone's like, we've got our marketing person, they used to work at some big company. I'm like, I don't care where they worked. I just know there's a direct correlation between really poor and high-wasted spend and it being run internally, regardless of anyone's experience. I've had this recently, about to take on a pretty big company in the B2B and SaaS space, but it's a niche industry. And one of my mates is the marketing manager there. He's like, someone internal is running it, the Google Ads account. And I just literally just clicked on it, clicked on the search term report. I'm like, bro, is this relevant? He's like, what the hell is this? I'm like, you tell me, you tell me, or ask your expert what all of this is. And the search terms were just like for like an industry that's just kind of like them, but not them. Like it's very clear if you knew the industry that it'd just be like, it wasn't for them. I'm like, so this expert, they're putting the right keywords, but their search terms are horrible, which means they're not doing keyword cleanups, all the traffic, and they're spending thousands of dollars a month on just wasted keyword, like I think up to 10K a month, and their budget was only like 15K a month. So it was, man, it's just like, you just see it all the time. It's like, you forget that, and there's a correlation I've noticed. The higher the spend the account, or like the bigger the business, the more likelihood the accounts run poorly. There's just like inverse correlation. And then when like it's a smaller business or they've worked with an agency or the business owner did it, sometimes it's usually better because I don't know. I think just people treat Google Ads like you just put a few keywords in and like, I've targeted the right keywords, sending it to a page. I think, and also I think people are more focused on the ad copy. I'm like, bro,
Yeah.
the ad copy is like one of the last things I focus on because the keywords are what people are looking for. Like that's their psychology. It's better to have the best type of keywords and best search terms and the worst ad copy than just like whatever keywords, horrible search terms, and like the most pristine godsend direct response ad copy. So I've
Targeting
just
over messaging. Targeting over messaging.
always targeting over there, always, because if you target the right people with the wrong message, you'll still get them as a client. Maybe less of them, but if you target the wrong people with the right message, you're not going to get anything.
Yes. Yeah.
Or even worse, you get the wrong type of people.
So that brings up. So I know we've gone pretty long here on this topic, but
Yeah.
it's a big topic. So one thing I wanted to get into that it's interesting. I've kind of tried to contend with this over the years, around when you start playing the search term game, and it's very, like we've stressed, it's very important to stay on top of your search terms. In other words, what are the searches that are triggering your ads, especially when the cost per clicks are so high? It's important. Now, you don't need to be micromanaging it constantly. So for all you clients out there, you got to trust the people that are running your account to do their job, to give them the autonomy that they need. But at the same time, as ad experts, I do also think there is a balance here, because I think a lot of times I see people are a little bit afraid of asking the client, like, what does this mean? Like, what are the, in some industries, if it's not, really easy, home and garden or leggings or something, right? Sometimes it's not really that obvious, and this is also true in the medical field, where what are these symptoms, or what does this actually mean? You're not going to know everything, guys. Like, you're just not going to know everything, and that's one of the things that the client can help you with, is the domain expertise. So what I like to do in those cases where a large amount of these search terms are things that I'll never know, I don't need to know, like that, it takes an entire education to understand that. And that's not what they're really looking to me for, is to learn the industry. You do want to create a system to work with the client on these things, if you're comfortable as an agency with doing that, because that's going to really help. You're not killing things that you think are irrelevant that could have led to a sale, but just know, getting into this, it's going to create a lot more back and forth, and you're going to have to educate the client on potentially match types and what we're actually talking about with a negative keyword. So it can kind of open the Pandora's box of kind of micromanagement. So you have to be really careful here. But in a lot of cases, I feel the payoff is way better in terms of results for them when you can lean on their domain expertise. This is also true of ad copy and keywords, than you just kind of guessing and getting subpar results because you weren't you were too afraid to just ask the client for some tips on domain expertise and jargon and things like that.
Yeah. Dude, I couldn't agree more. And so in terms of the negative keywords, my opinion, my direct experience is you do want to micromanage it for like the first week or 2 weeks. Like go in there twice a day and just prune all the negative keywords, exclude them as the exact match so you can actually see that it's been excluded, but then also add it to your account negative keyword list. Because if you're targeting the right type of keywords, you'll get the right type of traffic just over the right amount of time. But you've got to be aggressive on the start, because it's an 80-20 principle. Like in the first 20% time of the account, you'll get rid of 80% of the negative keywords. So I've just seen that. That's my direct experience. In terms of the domain expertise, man, this is something that for me, and I'm going to be like really humble here. There's been times where I've worked with clients and I've got them amazing results. I'm like, I don't even know what they do. And it's not a good thing, because it takes up a lot of mental RAM going like, I'm just constantly thinking, what the fuck did they do? Why don't I know what they do for some reason? And then, I know this sounds so overly simplistic, I just Google it and then just figure out what it is. And I know that seems so simple towards you like asking about the domain expertise. Sometimes if you just go on Google and just review it, like what is this thing? You'll actually learn it. And if you just put into ChatGPT and then use that as an educational prompt afterwards, I'd go into Google first here rather than just putting into ChatGPT, because ChatGPT you're delegating too much of your thinking. You do want to force yourself to take a bit of effort here. Is that I would say go to Google Ads for or Google first and just Google the thing and just go, is this relevant based on like my intuition? And then put it into ChatGPT, then ask the client as well. They're like, that's just like real experience. I'm not going to be like, yeah, just like ask the client. It's all chill. I'm like, sometimes I run accounts and I don't even know what they're doing, but I'm here to make them a lot of money and I look at the data. But then if I actually do look a bit deeper, it helps me understand the business more deeper, but it doesn't necessarily help the account. But then
Yeah.
when I understand the business deeper, I understand the client deeper, and then that feeds back into the account
Yeah.
for the client expertise.
Yeah, I mean, two things can be true. We do want to have a general understanding of the business and their offerings and the marketplace that they're in. But at scale, you are going to need, especially for some accounts, you're really going to need to lean on the client, because when we're
Yeah.
talking tens of thousands or even just thousands of search terms that are very industry specific, like the language is just, you're just not going to know it with, and you're not going to
Yeah.
want to Google 10,000. That's not a good use of your time to Google
Yeah.
every single search term. It's just not going to be. If a client who's been in this industry for 3 years can just browse and go, yep, relevant, 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 and to your like every single one, you're like, all right, let me copy and paste this. And what is this thing?
Yeah.
It's just not going to be a good use of your time. Now, as the the data guy that I am, I have absolutely tried to build out natural language processing, semantic clustering, all this fun stuff to try to go, okay, well, what if I didn't have the client? What if I just tried to understand what these things are at scale programmatically? How possible is that, right? It's still going to have challenges, guys. Like at the end of the day, they're still going to be doing their best to kind of guess what's going to be relevant, what's not. It's still going to take a lot of hand holding. Now, can you prune that model over time to get more accurate? Absolutely. That's part of what you're paying for with someone that can do something like that. But it is a very sophisticated approach, and you're going to need a lot of data to feel confident in order to train those things. So it takes a lot of sophistication, a lot of resources, a lot of time, which these companies tend not to really have in
Yeah.
those cases. So yes, maybe that's possible, but more often than not, the 80-20 is just go to the client. I have a general understanding what their offerings are, but then go to the client and say, okay, here's the things that I really didn't understand. Can you just give me a yes, no? Are these things relevant or not? If they're not relevant, we can get into a longer discussion as to what would make them relevant, but I think you're just not going to have time at scale to go through every single one.
Yeah.
Just tell me what's really irrelevant. Let's get rid of that stuff so we can allocate the spend to things that actually make sense for us.